Well, good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 168 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where we are waiting for the elves to spread us a pavilion among the trees with some nice soft couches.
Boy, doesn't that sound nice?
I know.
I tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as we don't have to go through that mental disrobe...
Well,
interrogation. Let's call it interrogation.
Yeah. Stop addressing me with your eyes, Galadriel.
Yeah, really. But folks, go ahead and pull up a bench in the common room and we'll be right there. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, a trumpet voice, a burning brand, Alan Sisto.
A weary pilgrim on the road indeed. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, more like an old man in a battered hat, honestly.
Ooh, ouch.
No, I'm joking. I've never seen you wear a hat. But hey.
Nothing about the old part being a joke, though. I hear that.
No,
all right.
we're not. Yeah, no. Definitely not the hat. But hey, As long as I'm letting you write these, I guess I have to accept what you give me.
Fair enough.
And of course, I'm going to be at your mercy for a few more minutes because I need you to take us back through the time bubble and introduce this next segment.
I think I can do that. Well, today we're bringing you another new installment of The North Wing.
Barlam and Butterbur had a room or two in the North Wing at the Prancing Pony Inn, made special for hobbits. Well, this is our place made special for some of our listeners to give us a chance to get to know them.
That's right. Now, rooms at the North Wing are hard to come by, so only our patrons at the Bobadil's Bequest and Kierdan's Contribution tiers are eligible. So if you'd like to be one of the next patrons to join us, be sure to check out patreon.com/prancingponypod.
By all means, please do. We've got a little bit of a waiting list for the North Wing right now, but we'll get to all of them soon, and we will always make room for more if we have to.
That's right. Well, then why don't we go ahead and welcome tonight's guest to the North Wing, Chad Howard.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Chad.
Hello.
It's good to be talking to you at last.
Indeed. We're very glad to have you. Looking forward to it.
Same here.
We're going to start with a real simple question, one we ask everybody here at the North Wing. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What do you do? What do your loved ones think of all this Tolkien stuff you're into? Do they think you're a total nerd? Do they like it too? That sort of thing.
Well, I currently live in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm originally from Eastern Kentucky, just in a very rural part of the state.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a physics teacher at a community college here in Louisville, and I've been doing science and physics for most of my career. In terms of Tolkien, I started, probably my first experience with Tolkien was, as it was for many people, the 1977 Rankin and Bass, The Hobbit.
Yeah, that was mine.
I remember seeing that when I was very young. And in middle school, so 13 or so, I picked up The Hobbit from the school library and finally read it. I loved it. And it was when I was in 8th grade, my aunt, who was actually my English teacher, at one point said, I think you would enjoy this, and gave me her copies of Lord of the Rings to read. And it was very overwhelming and over my head at that time. But I loved it from the start and reread it many times. And that's to set me on.
At least it wasn't the Silmarillion, right?
Right. You see, I bought Silmarillion maybe when I was 18 or so, and it sat on my shelf.
Oh, really?
I think I read it maybe when I was probably 24 or 25.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of my family, I've always been kind of more towards the academic inclined. So they've always known that I like the nerdy stuff. And I never, everybody kind of just took it in stride as well. That's the kind of things that Chad likes.
There you go.
It's good to be known for something, right?
That's right.
Well, Chad, there's a question that we ask everybody who comes to the Prancing Pony, and you've already partly answered it for us by telling us how you first discovered Tolkien's works. So now I want to ask you the rest of that question, which is, what was it on that first read you think that just kind of grabbed you? What was it that sucked you in, and what is it that keeps you coming back?
On the first read, it most likely, and this will probably answer a later question for you too, but I think the thing that most sucked me in were the elves and the whole concept of Rivendell. In that Rankin and Bass cartoon, they have a very brief, short Rivendell segment. And I remember when I was reading Lord of the Rings, having that aha moment where I realized, oh, this is that Rivendell place. And then as I read the poetry, although I didn't read all the poems at first, as I was reading the poetry and the depth of the writing there around Elrond and Rivendell, and then later Lothlorien, but especially Rivendell, I was just swept away, captivated me and brought me back.
Man, that is like the ultimate Tolkien experience. What you're describing is
Yeah.
reading Rivendell and Lord of the Rings and thinking, "Oh, that's that Rivendell place that I just scratched the surface on before." And then you go to the
Hmm.
Silmarillion and you're like, "Oh, that's that Gondolin place that I only scratched the surface on before." And you just keep going deeper and deeper, and there's always something more. That's great.
Oh yeah, exactly. And now with unfinished tales and things like that, you just find that there's no bottom to the well. You just keep
Hmm.
getting deeper all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, which is your favorite book in the Legendarium and why? And then, if you have one, what's your favorite non-Legendarium work and why?
Well, the my favorite book in the Legendarium is probably Return of the King, and well, I mean, obviously it's Lord of the Rings, but
Yeah.
the
Right.
Return
Yeah.
of the King volume, and it's because I just was always amazed at how he brought so many plot threads to fruition,
Hmm.
and culminated in this incredible eucatastrophe. In particular, my favorite section of literature, of all literature, for many years has been a segment which I know I'll hear you guys read in years to come,
Uh-huh.
and that is in the Field of Cormallen.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
The whole paragraph that ends with their celebration and ends with the famous sentence that their joy was like swords,
Mm.
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 Yeah.
as they wept and celebrated the completion of the quest.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is my favorite Legendarium volume. And then non-Legendarium, I had a volume of the Tolkien Reader, which had a lot of the novellas and short stories in it.
Oh, yeah. It had Adventures of Tom Bombadil and maybe Farmer Giles of
Yes,
Ham, right?
exactly. And
Right.
and
Hmm.
and I think it had almost all of the stuff in there, Rover Random and everything. And
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
I found it impenetrable for years and years and years. I would
Mm.
start reading something and think, oh, that this doesn't really connect with all that wonderful legendarium that I love. And just this past year, I finally picked up Tales from the Perilous Realm, Alan Lee illustrated.
Oh
Yes.
yes, that's a
Uh,
great
Gorgeous.
addition. Yeah.
I'm now older. I'm 42, and I was like, look, I can read these stories now. It's Tolkien. So I read all the way through, straight through all of them. And Smith of Wooten, not yeah, Smith of
Yeah.
Wooten Major is
Hmm.
not. Sorry, that's not the one where he meets the dragon, right?
No, it's Farmer
That would be Farmer
Giles.
Giles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So it is Smith of Wooten Major then, with the Fairy Queen.
Yep.
Yes.
Reading that, I read in the notes within that volume later that this was one of his most latest written things in his
Hmm.
life,
Yes. Yes, it
right
Yep.
was.
towards the end of his life. And I could see it because the
Hmm.
richness and the subtlety in
Hmm.
all of these themes he had been working on through Lord of the Rings and through the
Hmm.
Silmarillion were so obvious that he had distilled it down into this small fairy tale
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
spun through a couple of generations in this small village. And I just thought it was a thing of beauty.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It almost made me misty eyed reading it. So, yeah, it's definitely
I
Smith of
believe it.
Wooten.
I get it. I get it. I
Yeah.
could not agree more with
That's
everything you
Sean's
just said about
Sean's
how it's
favorite
distilled.
too.
It
Yeah.
is. That is my favorite non-legendary work, and
Yeah.
it really does. It just brings everything he ever wrote together into one very short, very approachable short story, and it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
There's not a wasted word there. That's
No,
the
there
thing.
really
He's
isn't.
he's
Yeah.
really so precise.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like it on your first read, but when you realize just how careful he was with everything, it's
Mm-hmm.
very precise, and it takes a very precise reading, I think, to really
Yep.
enjoy it and get the
Yeah.
most out of it.
You
Absolutely.
see that each paragraph is pivoting the story to its next necessary
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
impact.
Really.
Yep.
Yeah. Compact. That's a great way
Great.
to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Very much so. Well, Chad, do you have any Tolkien related goals that you'd like to share with us? Maybe there's a special book that you've been looking for your collection, or you're looking to go to a moot or go to Oxenmoot one day. What do you got?
Well, and for terms of literature, I own most of the works. I saw there's a new illustrated edition of the Unfinished Tales coming out, I believe, at the end of
Hmm.
this year that I'm almost certainly going to have to pick up for the illustrations alone.
Yeah.
I would love to attend a moot at some point. I've attended fan conventions over the years for some things, and but never a Tolkien one, and so I would love to do that at some point. In terms of goals, now having read the Tales from the Perilous Realm, probably I would like to try to read a little bit more of the history of Middle Earth. I have a couple of
Yeah.
volumes, and I know so much of their content from
Yeah.
various discussions
Hmm.
that I'd love to really dive in and try to enjoy creative process
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the Rings, especially, but all the works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, History of Middle Earth will certainly give you that insight. That's for sure.
And it'll keep you busy for a nice long time. And
Yes, it
the
will.
and the
No
great thing
doubt.
about it, Chad, is you don't really have to go in order. You can just
No.
pick one and
Mhm.
just jump
You
in.
want to start with the Lord of the Rings? Start with the
Yeah.
books that are on the history of the Lord of the Rings. Definitely.
Yep. You want to go
Yeah.
straight to Morgoth's Ring to read all that metaphysical stuff, and oh man, there's
Love
some
it.
great
Yeah.
great stuff in there. Go straight to
Mhm.
it.
Absolutely. Well, now it's time for our lightning round of quick questions and answers. So these are, well, they're lightning rounds, Chad, so let's keep them short.
Yeah.
All right. On the spot now. Who's your favorite First Age elf?
I have to go with Fingolfin. The contest with Morgoth is the
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
that directors of films dream of.
Yes, it is.
Hard to argue with that one. What about this one? Éomer or Faramir?
Ooh.
Oh, I would have said Faramir, but I think honestly, on my most recent reread of Lord of the Rings, Éomer, his relationship with Aragorn, their repartee as they keep looking towards finally fighting together and drawing swords together,
Yeah.
just had me coming back to every line. So, and I'm
Yeah.
surprising myself, but I would say Éomer.
Well, the Lord of the Mark approves.
Do you consider yourself a Merry or a Pippin?
Oh, definitely a Mary. I was never much of a rambunctious youth. I'm more of the somewhat silly, but still a little bit cautious and more
Mm-hmm.
careful hobbit, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Favorite author or book other than Tolkien?
I have a lot, but these days Brandon Sanderson is getting a
Hmm.
lot of my reading time. The work he's doing with a combined universe of novels over a period of his whole lifetime is incredible, and so I'm enjoying Brandon
Okay.
Sanderson. Lots of good fantasy writing and even a little bit of science fiction.
Oh, right on. Have to check those out.
Yeah, I heard some good stuff about him.
Now, the last question. One does not simply walk into Mordor, but if you could, who would you rather have at your side? The Gaffer or Lobelia? Okay, wait. No, I can't even let you answer that one. No, the real question is Treebeard or Huon?
Oh, how can you pass up Huon? I really think he could take down Sauron on his own if he were around. That's just
Yeah.
from Rivendell. Let Elrond just cut his leash and say, "Go get him." And I think Huon has
Go get him, boy. Who's a good dog? Who's a good dog?
the
Well,
best
he did
doggy.
pretty much take Sauron down before, and now that I think about it,
That's
right?
right.
And
In werewolf form, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, those are some great answers, Chad. We certainly enjoyed it. And thank you so much for joining us here on the North Wing. But I think it's time for us all to head back to the common room to join the rest of the listeners.
Thanks again, Chad. And we'll see you back at our next Questions After Nightfall, if not sooner.
Thanks a lot. It's been great being here.
Well, folks, now we return you to the podcast in progress.
Well, thank you very much, time traveling Alan.
You're very welcome, non-time traveling Sean. And now let's get back to the book, because we love the books here at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
We absolutely do. Folks, we bring you other Tolkien stuff from time to time, but at heart, Alan and I are fans of Tolkien's books and books about Tolkien. That's what we love.
That is indeed. Now, as you know, we read a lot of books in preparation for this show every week. And if you'd like to get your hands on a book that we've mentioned, you're going to want to check out the official library page of our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where we have links to every book we've mentioned on the show.
And there's a lot of other stuff on our website, too. Show notes and book links specific to each episode. There's some outtakes up there, Prancing Pony ponderings, and some other little extras as well.
Mm-hmm.
You'll also find a link to our online storefront at teespring.com/stores/PPP, where you can find shirts, mugs, stickers, and other cool PPP gear. So go check that out.
Definitely. And now let's join the company as they compare notes about that mental strip search.
Sounds so sordid when you say it like that.
It kind of does. Like, is Mary carrying a little something that he shouldn't be,
I know,
carrying
right?
some contraband that I'm not aware of?
It's only pipeweed, he swears.
Yeah, well, that's what he says.
Yeah.
Nicotiana, right? Nicotiana?
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
we're good then.
That's all it is.
Well, I'm going to have you pick up right where we left off in the last chapter with the company sleeping on the ground.
All right. That night the company slept upon the ground, much to the satisfaction of the hobbits. The elves spread for them a pavilion among the trees near the fountain, and in it they laid soft couches. Then, speaking words of peace with fair elvish voices, they left them. For a little while the travelers talked of their night before in the treetops, and of their day's journey, and of the Lord and Lady, for they had not yet the heart to look further back.
Mm-hmm.
"What did you blush for, Sam?" said Pippin. You soon broke down. Anyone would have thought you had a guilty conscience. I hope it was nothing worse than a wicked plot to steal one of my blankets." "I never thought no such thing," answered Sam, in no mood for jest. "If you want to know, I felt as if I hadn't got nothing on, and I didn't like it. She seemed to be looking inside me and asking me what I would do if she gave me the chance of flying back home to the Shire to a nice little hole with a bit of garden of my own." "That's funny," said Mary. "Almost exactly what I felt myself. Only, well, I don't think I'll say any more," he ended lamely. All of them, it seemed, had fared alike. Each had felt that he was offered a choice between a shadow full of fear that lay ahead and something that he greatly desired. Clear before his mind it lay, and to get it he had only to turn aside from the road and leave the quest and the war against Sauron to others.
Well, talking about the interrogation, talking about
Yeah.
how they were given the third degree with no words.
Yeah.
Poor Sam.
And the fact that they all had a similar experience of that.
Yeah.
And, I guess we'll get to that in a minute, but
We will. I mean, I know we don't get to read all the rest, but they all had the same kind of thing, Gimli and Boromir as
Yeah.
well.
yeah.
Let's start at the beginning of that passage, though. The elves giving them a place to rest. Interesting, though, they say the night before in the treetops. Now, their last night was on the ground, still blindfolded in the night. Here was the line. I'm still waiting. There should be a song, "Blindfolded in the Night."
But were they blindfolded with white satin?
Right, exactly. Oh, man.
Because were they knights of white satin?
The Knights of White
Knights
Satin.
in white satin.
I love that. All right. So here's the line from that, though. Then they rested and slept without fear upon the ground, for their guides would not permit them to unbind their eyes, and they could not climb. In the morning they went on again, walking without haste. So what gives, Sean?
Yeah, well, actually, Christopher Tolkien acknowledges this problem in the Treason of Isengard. He notes that in an earlier version, the Fellowship actually met the marching host at Caras Galadon. Well, it was actually Caras Galadon at the time, but
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Galadriel.
we've talked
and
about
all
that already.
Yeah.
And they had their blindfolds removed then, the same day that they had left Nimrodel.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So the extension of the journey by an extra day means this passage, in Christopher's words, required revision that it did not receive.
Well, that's
There you go.
pretty straightforward and pretty obvious.
Pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Somebody missed that one. All right.
Mhm.
Well, then we get that discussion of the interrogation. We get Pippin, as always, cracking a joke. He's the first one
yeah.
to say something, to make it, you were going to steal a blanket, weren't you, Sam?
Yeah, such a Pippin
Sam,
thing to do.
not in a
It's
mood.
insane.
Don't play, man.
Uh-huh.
Don't play. He's
Yeah.
not really very happy right
It's a
now.
little indignant about it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's embarrassed still, I think. He felt
I think you're right.
naked and uncomfortable. And who wouldn't feel uncomfortable if they were naked in front of all of their friends and a couple of
Yeah.
elven lords and ladies? Yeah.
And when you're already embarrassed about something and you're already blushing, it doesn't make you feel better when somebody points out that you were blushing, does it?
Right. You're right. No, it does not help matters to point out the obvious. Thanks a lot, Pippin. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's describing the temptation, really, and that's what these are. They were tempted.
Mhm.
He was tempted with going back home to his own little hole with a bit of garden.
Mhm.
Exactly what he would want. And then that's what we find out each of them was facing, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, even Mary felt that. He doesn't want to
Yeah.
add details, but
Well,
he
no.
does say he felt that. And then, yeah, although that's where I stopped my reading, but moving on, the rest of the company really had similar experiences, the same sort of choice between, this incredible fear that lies ahead and something that they
Mhm.
desire.
Yeah.
And Gimli points out, I really like this, that Gimli points out that my choice would be secret.
Yeah.
It would be
Nobody
no
would even
home to
know which
myself,
one I
so-
did.
So,
Yeah.
there'd be no judgment. You could take the less moral choice. You could take
Right.
the easy way out, and nobody would ever know. Nobody would ever judge you for that.
But you would know, Gimli.
But you would know. Absolutely,
Yeah.
you would know.
Mhm.
And that kind of gets to what Boromir's point is that Boromir picks out that it must be a test.
Yeah.
But he says it felt like she was tempting us with something that she didn't have the power to fulfill.
Yeah.
And that's a really fascinating thing because it's
Boy, it is, isn't it?
it's-
She
it's
couldn't
sort of-
just give him what.
She
She couldn't
can't
give
just give
Sam
him-
a hole
right.
of his own and a
Right.
garden.
right. And so it's a sort of empty temptation. It is pure test.
Oh, yeah. But it's almost like a hypothetical test, isn't it?
It is like a hypothetical test. It's like an ethical well, what's the word? Like an ethical thought
The
experiment.
ethical dilemma.
Almost.
Oh yeah, thought
Yeah.
experiment. That's a good way
Yeah,
of putting it.
an
Yeah.
ethical dilemma is a good way of putting it too. Is she's just asking you these questions, just, hey, if you could have this, would you want it? And
Yeah.
she really is just testing them. I think there's
Mhm.
nothing more to it than that.
And it goes along with what she said before, that as long as the company remains true, there's hope.
It's a good point. Yeah.
So,
Of
you know,
course.
here she's trying to find out, is the company true? Is
Are the
everybody in
company
the
going to
company
remain true?
true?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now
But then
Boromir says,
yeah, I was going to
yeah.
say.
I mean, it's people feel like I beat up on Boromir, so I don't.
Well, we
I don't
do a
want to
little
say
bit.
Yeah, I think I've done it more than you have, honestly.
Well, you know me. I love Boromir because I see the redemption ahead of time. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
No.
his story of repentance is one of the most amazing ones in all of the story. But
Absolutely, absolutely, it is. I do still see him as a very flawed character
oh yeah,
here,
deeply. Mhm.
and I don't want to say this
He
is
is his
arrogant.
father's son. Let's be clear.
That is true. That is true. And I don't want to be be too harsh on him by saying this is kind of an arrogant response, but it is kind of an arrogant response where
Oh,
he
it
says,
is.
it need not be said that the men of Gondor are true, or the men of Minas
Just
Tirith
that
are
part
true.
alone, it need
Yeah.
not be said, is, well, first of all, it's something you never need to say. It's sort of
True.
like saying it goes without saying. If that's the case, then don't say
Don't
it.
say it. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Well,
He could have just said she was offering what she pretended to have the power to give. No. Men of Minas Tirith are true to their word.
Yeah, it need not be said that I refuse to listen.
Yeah.
If you have to say it out loud, then that indicates that there was doubt there.
That's exactly right. He thinks thou doth protest too much.
Exactly what I was thinking. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt.
And of course, we know where that's going to end. And it's not like it was a foregone conclusion here, but obviously it
he
was
still
already in his
operates
heart
with free
somewhere.
will. Yeah, he operates with free will. That's something we'll have to really talk about when we get there too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But Frodo has a really interesting reaction. He will not speak. He is completely secretive about this.
I will have none of this. I'm not going to talk about this at all.
Yeah. And Boromir, he's trying to get a little something out of him. Like, hey.
Oh, yeah.
She was looking at you a long time, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And Frodo says, yeah, but whatever came into my mind, then I will keep there.
Yeah. I'm not going to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
But he dismisses that like, well, I'm not sure of her purpose. And, I basically he's saying, I don't trust this lady.
Oh, yeah.
And Aragorn, that's when he jumps in. He hasn't said a word as they talked about this interrogation. Boy, he speaks sternly. And he really chides Boromir for his suspicion.
He absolutely does, yeah.
He points out, look, there is no evil in this land. There is no evil in her. The only evil that exists is if you bring it with you. And if you do, woe to you. You really don't want to be that man.
This is Third Age Westron for don't start nothing, won't be nothing.
That is true. That is true.
and yeah, because it's like, look, there's no evil here unless you bring it here yourself, which is a slightly pointed thing to say. He is
slightly. Yeah.
He basically what he's saying is the fact that you're suspicious makes you suspicious.
That's right.
And I think that's a really fascinating perspective to bring in here.
Well, again, this is basically his grandmother-in-law. Not yet, but is soon to be. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He has a deep, abiding affection for these people and an appreciation for who they are, and he knows.
And he knows this place. He loves this place. We saw this previously,
but he knows they're trustworthy. Of course,
yeah, he does.
So he's going to defend them to Boromir's doubt, and automatically it's going to put Boromir in a poor light. For having that suspicion. Yeah.
And I think that's worth lingering on because this is a place that he feels comfortable. This is the place where he met Arwen.
Yeah. And
this is the place that he
His
met
heart resides here. His heart resides here for the rest of time.
It's the place where they plighted their troth, at least, or where they got engaged. It's where he proposed. Aw.
And where they didn't hold a debate, I'll have it noted. Anytime anybody gets engaged now, I mean, I'm too old to have friends who get engaged, but if anybody gets engaged, did you guys have a debate first? I just want to find out. Just doing a poll. I just want to know how many people had a debate. Anyway,
so no, that's all right. But I think it's worth pointing out. This is a home to him. This is his family, and like you said, it's his grandmother-in-law. Not yet, but he's still she's
for
going
all
to be.
intents and purposes, certainly. Yeah.
So this is family, and this is a place that he considers like a home, and it is noticeable that he feels more comfortable here than he has in a long time.
Absolutely, which we see in this very next line. I'm going to sleep without fear for the first time since we left Rivendell. That's been a long time. And now he's finally going to be able to sleep well. And he needs that rest. He needs that sleep because he's got genuine grief and weariness.
Yeah.
He needs this refreshment. Absolutely.
Yeah. I dare say this is not the last time that this Lorien is going to remind me of the original Gardens of Lorien in Valinor. Remember, that was a place of rest and recovery and restoration for the Valar.
Yes, it was. That's right.
And we do see that characteristic of this place. So,
well, you're not kidding. But does it remind you of Lorien from Babylon 5? That
little
really
bit,
tall
yeah.
guy with that little bump in his forehead.
Absolutely. He was always saying really interesting things to
with the really long fingers.
He did have really long fingers.
He did. He was an interesting character, that's for sure.
Yeah, he was. Season 3 and 4, wasn't it?
3 and 4, yeah. The end of 3 and early 4, yeah.
I got to watch B5 again. It's been like...
I know, I haven't watched it.
It's been like a year and a half since I watched it.
Since that Facebook group, and we were doing that like 2 episodes a week thing. Yeah.
Yeah. That was fun.
That was fun.
But anyway, we digress.
All right, we digress.
So, where were we? So they wake late in the morning.
Yeah.
Bright daylight.
Late in the morning. I mean, they have really slept in. They missed their alarm. They hit snooze a few times. And now the light of day is broad upon the lawn.
Yeah.
I wish I could sleep that late. Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, before
No matter how late I go to bed, I end up waking up at 6. Just doesn't matter. I could go to bed at 2:30 in the morning. I'm still going to wake up at 6.
Yeah.
I'll be tired, but I'm not going to sleep until the light of day is broad upon the lawn.
There you
unfortunately. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pick up there, and we're going to talk about the passage of time in Lothlorien, as well as some of the talk of Gandalf. They remained some days in Lothlorien, so far as they could tell or remember. All the while that they dwelt there, the sun shone clear, save for a gentle rain that fell at times, and passed away, leaving all things fresh and clean. The air was cool and soft, as if it were early spring, yet they felt about them the deep and thoughtful quiet of winter. It seemed to them that they did little but eat and drink and rest, and walk among the trees, and it was enough. They had not seen the lord and lady again, and they had little speech with the elven folk, for few of these knew or would use the Westron tongue. Haldir had bidden them farewell, and gone back again to the fences of the north, where great watch was now kept, since the tidings of Moria that the company had brought. Legolas was away much among the Galadrim, and after the first night he did not sleep with the other companions, though he returned to eat and talk with them. Often he took Gimli with him when he went abroad in the land, and the others wondered at this change. Now as the companions sat or walked together, they spoke of Gandalf, and all that each had known and seen of him came clear before their minds. As they were healed of hurt and weariness of body, the grief of their loss grew more keen. Often they heard nearby elvish voices singing, and knew that they were making songs of lamentation for his fall, for they caught his name among the sweet, sad words that they could not understand. Mithrandir, Mithrandir, sang the elves, O pilgrim grey, for so they loved to call him. But if Legolas was with the company, he would not interpret the songs for them, saying that he had not the skill, and that for him the grief was still too near, a matter for tears, and not yet for song. Boy, that is deeply
That is one
sorrowful.
of those passages that I love. I love that last statement. For him the grief is still too near.
Tears.
A matter for tears, and not yet for song. It's one of those beautiful descriptions.
At this point, it's still something to feel and not something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to experience it.
Yeah. And I think maybe I'm reading too much into it, but you put things into song to remember them,
right?
And I think that Legolas is saying that he doesn't need to remember it.
I don't need to. I don't need to memorialize.
Don't need to relive that right now. I'm still feeling the grief.
Yeah. It's very, very fresh.
But let's go back to the beginning of the passage that you read there, and we'll see that they were there for some days, so far as they could tell. But the days were all the same, weren't they? It was clear sun, gentle rain, cool air, kind of like Southern California.
Yeah.
But even the things they did were the same, or at least seemed to be the same. They just eat, drink, rest, walk among the trees. I mean, they literally have too much time on their hands, but it's fine, right?
Sorry, exactly, I got to throw that in there.
Yeah, totally. But that's enough, right? I mean, it's fine. They're not bored. They don't feel unfulfilled. No. They don't feel like, man, we got to get out of here. This place is just dull.
Enough. Eat, drink, rest, and walk, and that's that satisfies them.
It's fulfilling. They're
Yes.
experiencing recovery and escape right here.
Mm-hmm.
This is their getaway. This is a much needed break for
Yeah.
them.
It really is. Now, it's a vacation without Celeborn or Galadriel. The Lord and Lady
True.
aren't around. And they're not even really talking with the elves either, for that matter. The ones, the few that can speak it won't, which is interesting. We've talked about language before, but Haldir we know did, but he told us that very few speak it. Really, just the handful that need to travel or communicate with outside realms.
Right.
So it's not a surprise that the elves in that nearby vicinity don't speak their language. So they're really just isolated.
Right.
And they're able to still go and do things, but they're not communicating with the people that
they're not really. Yeah, they're not really. What's the word? I mean, they're not really.
They're not socializing with the elves, or not.
Yeah, exactly. They're not really partaking in the community as much. I mean, obviously they're partaking in the existence and the life and the relaxation and everything, but they're not. They can't have much of a sense of community if they're not talking to the elves who live there.
No,
and,
but Legolas is.
But Legolas isn't with the Fellowship much at all.
I know.
He's kind of gone
Peace
native.
out,
He's
guys. I'm going to go hang with the elves.
Yeah, he's totally gone native, hanging out with the elves. He slept with them the first night, but he does return to eat and talk to them. So he's probably bringing back some news about things that are going on. And hey, there's going to be this big party over at Rumil's house later. You guys should totally show up, and probably maybe some of that stuff.
Probably. And then we get that he took Gimli with him. So now we finally get actual signs of this developing friendship with Gimli that we've been looking for all over the place through the text, even when it didn't exist.
Yeah.
This is that moment, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is this somehow the effect of Galadriel on Gimli?
I think so. I think absolutely. Yeah. It's the effect of Galadriel on Legolas. Legolas saw the way Galadriel treated Gimli.
True.
And I think he took his cue from her. I think that's what we're seeing.
I think that's a good point, because I was going to ask, has Gimli softened or has Legolas softened? And
I think both have.
Probably both, because Gimli has seen, oh, I can actually love an elf.
An elf can be a friend, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And so he's softened, but I think you're right. Legolas saw the way she looked at him, and he realized, oh, well, this person is worth my time, and maybe I can be friends with a dwarf. And I think that's really cool.
I think it is. And it's one of those moments, this is that ongoing friendship that you and I can look at and be like, wow, this is a really neat theme that runs through the text.
Mm-hmm.
This, these people that shouldn't be friends, really, that historically speaking, have every reason to hate each other.
Yeah.
Not personally, just historically.
Yeah.
And yet they overcome that.
Yeah.
They overcome
that.
They
have
prejudices.
They should. They don't hate each other personally. They don't know each other yet.
Right.
But they have prejudices against one another, and they can overcome that. And that's a really profound thing. And I think it's an often overlooked theme in Tolkien, but it is all over Tolkien.
Yes, it is. You're absolutely right.
And speaking of friendship, as the companions are sitting and walking together, they're speaking of Gandalf.
Yes, they are.
And we see that their memories of him are clear. They came clear before their minds.
That's an interesting thing, isn't it?
It is.
All that they had known and seen of him.
I'm curious what you think is going on here. I know what I think it is.
I think this is definitely a little bit of the magic of the place of Lothlorien. This is...
I think so.
That... What is it that makes memories fade in our world, right? It's time. The passage of time makes those memories fade, and we no longer remember with clarity the words that were said or the moments that took place.
Exactly.
Here, time is different. It passes differently, and they're almost in a stasis, if you will, and it's enough for their minds, combined with the recovery and the rest that they've gotten, for them to see an effect of this clarity of memory. I
could not agree more. I could not have said it better. Yeah, it is.
Well, there you go.
It is that. I think it's exactly that. It is the timelessness of the place, just as when Frodo walked into Lothlorien and he saw everything as if it was brand new, as if his were the first eyes to have seen it.
Yeah.
That's
a
how
great
they're
parallel.
seeing their memories. Yeah.
You're right. This is like they're remembering those memories for the first time. That's another great way to put it.
Exactly. So it is the timelessness of the place, and it's recovery of that clear view, put into a very literal sense in the story here.
Boy, you're not kidding. But that has a price, doesn't it? Because as they remember him more clearly, and these memories become crystal clear. And as they are healed of their immediate needs, the hurt and the weariness, they experience that grief more intensely, don't they?
They do. And I think this is going to be key with something Sam says later on.
Boy,
but we'll get there in a bit.
Yeah, we will. To be honest, the first thing that came to my mind was what it must have been like for Tolkien and other soldiers during World War I. Same kind of thing, in the sense that they might lose somebody on the battlefield, a dear friend, but they're not able to process and really, really experience that grief, that pain of loss, until they're out of the immediacy of danger, until they've had a chance to recover a little bit. And now it hits, and it hits hard.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's true of grief of any kind, honestly. Yeah. It's probably more acutely so with soldiers on the battlefield.
Well, I'm thinking any situation where you're at
where you're in danger and
risk,
you simply don't have the luxury of stopping to process what just happened.
Yeah, you don't have the mental bandwidth.
Exactly.
Yeah. Only once you've had a chance to take a breath and to be out of harm's way do you then have that luxury, and I don't want to call it a luxury, it's a necessity, but do you have the time then to process that grief and experience it? And
and I don't mean luxury in like a sense like that.
I know
like,
you didn't. Right.
You're in survival mode and you don't have the time for that higher order mental capacity of,
exactly.
Dealing
That's
with
a great
grief.
way of putting it. Yeah, because that is a higher mental order, certainly.
But I think anybody who's experienced grief, loss of a loved one of any kind, sometimes it takes a while before it sinks in, and then when it does, it's like it can be a month later, and suddenly it hits you.
And it hits like a ton of bricks. Absolutely. Yeah. The grief of their loss grew more keen.
Mm-hmm.
So for them, I think that's why when we get to Legolas talking about, that it's the grief is still too near. It's a matter for tears and not yet for song. We may be thinking of this as 2 or 3 days after the Gandalf's fall, but for him, he's just now starting to really process that and experience that grief fresh.
Yeah.
So of course this is going to be way too close to be.
And think about, for an elf, what a few days feels like to an elf. When they live for centuries and millennia.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
This just happened, especially for Legolas.
Yeah, especially.
And the elves. You see this with the other elves too. You see the elves. Or don't see, we hear the elves singing songs of lamentation. They're singing songs for Mithrandir, O Pilgrim Grey, and that is, of course, the meaning of that word, Mithrandir, the Grey Pilgrim. Got a little word nerdery on that one, if I may.
Good. I expected you would. Fire away, sir.
Of course, I'm going to. So, myth means gray. That's actually a word root that comes up in a lot of words, including things like Mithril and so forth.
Yeah.
Mithlond, the Grey Havens, and Mithril, things like that.
Yeah.
Randir is an interesting one. It's translated as pilgrim. It literally means something like wandering man. And you can actually look in The Lost Road, the etymologies that's in that book, and there's an Elvish root ran, R-A-N, which means wander or stray, which, of course, is at the root of this, Randir. It's also, interestingly, at the root of a little-known name for the moon among the Noldor. If you go back to the Silmarillion, chapter 11, you see that one of the names the Noldor have for the moon is Rana, the Wayward. Because of its, it's
inconsistent.
It's more inconsistency and its idiosyncratic
phases
courses.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. And so that word Rana, meaning the Wayward, comes from that same word, Ran, meaning to wander or stray.
Okay. I like that. The wandering man.
I thought that was kind of a neat connection. I'm always into those weird connections, things you would not think are related, but that are related, at least linguistically.
That is really cool.
But as we were just saying, we've already talked about this, but then Legolas, he refuses to interpret the song. He said this is a moment to be grieved, not a moment for song just yet. And of course, translating it would be like putting it into song in his own words. So he's just not ready to do that.
No, he's not. But speaking of song, Frodo's about to make his debut on Lothlorien's Got Talent. But before we hear from him, we want to take a minute to remind you about our new friends over at Little Passports.
Folks, with schools closed for who knows how long, and with distance learning being the new normal for all of us parents, we're still looking for ways to make learning fun and interactive for our kids. And we know many of you are doing the same. And that's why we want to introduce you to Little Passports.
Definitely. I mean, textbooks and worksheets are helpful, but look, let's be honest. We know they're not always that exciting. And instead, Little Passports is bringing education to life with some great stuff.
Yeah, Little Passports is a subscription box full of toys and games for kids ages 3 and up. It educates and entertains.
Now, whether it's the Science Expeditions pack with experiments like making your own slime, which that's just phenomenal, or the USA edition that teaches kids about every one of the 50 states, there are boxes for every kid.
For $12.95 a month, there is a ton of stuff to explore right in your own home with Little Passports.
And now, just for our listeners, Little Passports is offering 15% off the price of any subscription. Now, that means your child could be flying rockets or looking through a microscope in no time.
And you're going to want to use offer code PPP at checkout for 15% off your order. That's PPP at littlepassports.com.
And there's also a How Did You Hear About Us question, so please let them know you heard about them from us. They really are a great fit for this show, and we'd love to have them back. And now let's get on to Frodo's song for Gandalf. Sean, why don't you go ahead and pick up with that last paragraph of prose right before the song starts itself?
All right, you got it. It was Frodo who first put something of his sorrow into halting words. He was seldom moved to make song or rhyme. Even in Rivendell he had listened and had not sung himself, though his memory was stored with many things that others had made before him. But now, as he sat beside the fountain in Lorien and heard about him the voices of the elves, his thought took shape in a song that seemed fair to him. Yet when he tried to repeat it to Sam, only snatches remained, faded as a handful of withered leaves. When evening in the shire was grey, his footsteps on the hill were heard. Before the dawn he went away, on journey long without a word.
And then we're going to skip a couple stanzas, and I'll read the fourth one. A deadly sword, a healing hand, a back that bent beneath its load, a trumpet voice, a burning brand, a weary pilgrim on the road.
A lord of wisdom throned he sat, swift in anger, quick to laugh, an old man in a battered hat who leaned upon a thorny staff. He stood upon the bridge alone, and fire and shadow both defied. His staff was broken on the stone. In Khazad-dûm his wisdom died.
Well, as much as I hate to follow that, I'm going to go back to
Notice, though, I didn't make you follow it with any more poetry.
Yeah, thank you for that, because it's hard to top. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pick up with the dialogue right after that.
All right.
Why, you'll be beating Mr. Bilbo next, said Sam. No, I'm afraid not, said Frodo. But that is the best I can do yet. Well, Mr. Frodo, if you do have another go, I hope you'll say a word about his fireworks, said Sam. Something like this. The finest rockets ever seen, they burst in stars of blue and green, or after thunder golden showers came falling like a rain of flowers. Though that doesn't do them justice by a long road. No, I'll leave that to you, Sam, or perhaps to Bilbo. But, well, I can't talk of it any more. I can't bear to think of bringing the news to him.
Boy, that would be hard. Oh,
wouldn't it, though?
Just heart-wrenching.
So, Frodo sings this song.
Mm-hmm.
We're told this is a rarity for Frodo. He doesn't like to write poetry. He doesn't like to sing. This is a big difference between him and Bilbo, who, of course,
true.
We know Bilbo loves to write, loves to sing.
Yeah.
But his thoughts, which took shape in a beautiful song, this is really an inspiration moment to me.
Yes, it is.
He's not even really actively writing this thing. It just comes to him.
Coming off the top of his head,
Coming off the top of his head. And I have to think that, again, this is Lothlorien's effect on him.
Oh,
It's this
Without
fairy place, and it is enchanting and inspiring him.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, it is.
And yet when he tries to open his mouth to repeat it to Sam, only snatches of it remained. It just fades.
Yeah. Like a dream. You know how sometimes you'll have this amazing dream and it seems so vivid, and the minute you try to even describe it, it slips through your hands like sand.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes it all the more precious, doesn't it? The fact that
it does. You're right.
You can't quite hold on to it.
No. Boy, that does make it deeply valuable. Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the song itself then. It really is a great description of who Gandalf was in so many aspects.
Covers everything about him. It covers... I keep on thinking about, as I read this poem, I keep on thinking about how it covers the myth and the man, It covers
all of it.
Covers both aspects of him. So let's take a look at it.
Yeah. It talks about his travels, of course, the fact that he went really anywhere he wanted to go. He was never, stuck. He was pretty much that rolling stone that gathers no moss, but he went wherever he wanted. But I like that we see his willingness to work with all peoples. That line in the stanza we didn't read about dwarf and hobbit, elves and men, mortal and immortal folk, and even
Yes.
bird on bough and beast in den. He worked with all creatures, peoples and animals.
Yes. And that last line of that stanza, I think bears repeating. He spoke to them in their own secret tongues.
Yes.
We know how
Yes.
important language is in Tolkien, and so
True.
that indicates that Gandalf is able to connect with people on their own level. He's able to communicate to them as one of their own. And I think that is such an important part of why he was who he was, why he did what he did, why he kindled so many hearts. Because he could just relate. If it was an ordinary guy, you might say, oh, he could relate to anybody. Well, this is Gandalf,
Right.
so he can do that, but even more so. But it's that kind of thing where he could be a friend to anyone. And
Yes,
it's
he could.
truly, truly inspiring.
Yeah.
With the next stanza, the one you read, we see a lot of great stuff here. We see that he was a warrior, a deadly sword, but also a healer.
Yeah.
And we see that he was a bearer of burdens, back bent beneath its load.
Yeah.
But a herald, right? That's
Yep,
the trumpet
yeah.
voice.
Trumpet voice.
He was also an inspiration, that kindler of hearts, the burning
Right,
brand.
the burning brand.
But also a pilgrim, a weary pilgrim on the road.
Indeed. I mean, we don't really know where his pilgrimage would take him, but he definitely was somebody who never had a home. You never found out about Gandalf's estate in the north. I mean, it just didn't exist.
Yeah.
He didn't have a place to lay his head, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, people ask us about that sometimes when talking about his ring.
Right.
But, we talk about how Elrond's ring protected Rivendell, how Galadriel's ring protected Lorien. And then people sometimes ask, oh, well, what was the realm that Gandalf's ring protected? Was he protecting the Shire, or was he protecting some other place? Like, no, I don't think it was protecting any place. I think he was truly the Rolling Stone that gathered no moss. He had no place.
From nowhere.
He used his ring for other things.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
So.
Yes, he did. And then we get some of his character. I love this. Wise, of course. I mean, he's a wizard. I mean, that's part of the definition of the word.
Yeah.
Quick-tempered and quick to laugh. I love that. That's
just ask
so
Pippin about
endearing.
that.
Yeah.
But, it shows this range of emotions, doesn't it? It's very human.
Yeah.
Quick-tempered and quick
He's
to laugh.
very human. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's very much an ability to identify with him.
Yes.
He's, like we said earlier, he's not like an everyman because he's a wizard.
Right.
But yeah, you really could connect with him. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But also not only his personality, but even just the reality of his physical nature. He did come to Middle-earth as an old man. That's what the Astari did. He was aged. He was old, and he had to use a staff to get around. Maybe not as much as some people would think, Wormtongue.
Right.
But he did lean upon that old staff.
What do you think about it being called thorny? I feel like there's some significance to that.
I don't know.
A thorny staff it's rough around the edges. It's not.
Oh yeah, it's not refined. You're right.
Yeah, it's not. And I don't recall off the top of my head how Saruman's staff is described.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's certainly, like polished Lebethron or something.
Right, and certainly if you think about like the Peter Jackson movies, where there were very different designs for those two staffs.
True.
And probably most of the art that I could think of has you look at you imagine very different staffs, and I like the fact that Gandalf's is specifically described as thorny because there's something natural about it, something again rough around the edges. It's not perfect, it's not totally polished, but it's real. It's genuine.
Yeah.
And I do like that.
That is a very good point.
Well, thank you.
We're going to have to really look that up. Maybe that's something for the P5, see if we've got any information in the text, because we may not. It may just be a movie thing.
Yeah, it may be. I'll have to look into Saruman's staff.
Yeah. Well, what about the rhyme scheme, Sean? That's fairly straightforward, but you're more the poet between us, so let us know a little bit about your thoughts there.
Let's not go overboard. I've studied some poetry.
Did I give you too much credit there, Sean?
Maybe a little bit. Back in high school, I used to write a little poetry, but no. Actually, I did, but the less said about it, the better. Yeah, no, I've studied a fair bit of poetry. This is a pretty straightforward rhyme scheme, just an A-B rhyme scheme, every other line rhyming within a stanza. As far as the meter goes, it's iambic tetrameter. That's a pretty straightforward meter for poetry in English. Iambic is sort of the standard metrical foot of English. It's da-dunt, unstressed, stressed. And then tetrameter just means there's 4 of those in a line of poetry.
Okay, so and you can hear that with any of these lines. A deadly sword, a healing hand.
Exactly, Pretty straightforward.
Right.
The fact that it's in iambic tetrameter does put it in the same class as a lot of Tolkien's poetry. I'm thinking primarily of the Lay of Leithian right now is in that meter. But again, it's just a very natural meter. There's nothing really funky going on here. It's not like a Kalevala meter or anything like that. It's really, really straightforward.
Yeah, it is. Well, Sam's response to the poem, though, or to the song, Sam's not much of a poetry critic, obviously. He's telling him, you're going to be as good as Mr. Bilbo next. What do we just say? Frodo doesn't write stuff, Bilbo does. So,
Right.
no, this probably isn't up there with the Song of Eärendil. But emotionally it is. There's a much...
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that we miss here if we tease Sam a little too much. There's such power in these words because they're talking here about not a historical figure, not something that happened a generation ago or 1,000 years ago. We're talking about something that just happened a few days ago to somebody we loved.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think I said this a moment ago, but I feel like Frodo's poem hits on Gandalf the myth. You know, it talked about him as being this warrior and this healer and this kindler. You know, that's kind of like, that's like the stuff that's going to go down in the history books or in of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. But like the swift in anger, the quick to laugh, that's the stuff that your friends are going to remember about you.
Yeah.
And Frodo's poem hits on both of those. And because of that, it is so honest. And for that reason, I think the depth is there. The honesty is there. And that's what makes it, in a sense, as good as what Bilbo can write.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I may have teased Sam about that, but
it's really,
he's right in terms of the emotional impact of the song. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but then Frodo, of course, humbly denies that he's even anywhere near that.
Yeah.
But he does acknowledge, like, this is the best I can do right now.
Yeah. And that's cool. And then Sam adds his own verse. I love this little appendix that Sam adds on the fireworks.
Yes.
So if you look at Sam's verse compared to Frodo's verses, it is the same meter, the same iambic tetrameter, the finest rockets ever seen. Slightly different rhyme scheme. Sam's going with an AABB here instead of an ABAB. Scene green, showers, flowers.
Yep.
I did try to pronounce showers and flowers as a monosyllabic word. I hope that came through in the reading because you really need to do that to fit it into the iambic tetrameter.
Otherwise the meter's off. You're right.
Yeah.
Golden showers falling like a rain of flowers. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope that came across in my reading.
It did.
Good. I'm glad. But I love the content of this because on a certain level, it looks like Sam is focusing on the most trivial thing imaginable, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it almost seems a little bit childish compared to Frodo's great poetry about Gandalf the man, Gandalf the myth. And here he is talking about Gandalf's fireworks. But again, take a step back and realize that Sam is talking about something deeply personal. He's talking about the impact that Gandalf had on him. You know, he's talking about what he remembers about Gandalf. And I think that is just as emotional, that's just as honest, and just as, I think, just as beautiful in its way as what Frodo wrote.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. So at the end of this, though, we get to Frodo's response about the poetry really for both of them. The fact is, look, I'm going to have to leave this to Bilbo, but that makes me think of Bilbo, and I don't want to have to tell him.
Yeah,
this is going
don't want to have to think about that right now. Yep.
No. And what a horrible spot to be in. Frodo's got to bring this news to Bilbo.
Yeah.
But before we do move on to Frodo and Sam talking about the elves, and that's going to be a great conversation, Sean and I want to remind you about a partner that we introduced to you last week, Mythology Candles.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, folks, my wife came across their website a little while ago, and she just knew that our show and their candles would be a perfect match. So we reached out, and here they are. Mythology Candles are all about creating a more immersive experience through fantasy-inspired candles, and I love this.
I know, it's really cool. Now, you might be reading a Tolkien book or playing a tabletop game or maybe an RPG. Maybe you're just listening to some great music. But Mythology Candles really transport you to another realm.
Yes, they do. They're handcrafted, and they're made with luxurious, eco-friendly coconut wax, crackling wooden wicks, and they have unique custom fragrances like King of the Wood Elves, Wizard's Pipeweed, or the Ranger, if any of those sound familiar.
And I think they do. It's pretty clear we share a common inspiration, don't we?
Yes.
I certainly
Very
like
much.
the sound of those candles, yeah.
So we want you to check out mythologycandles.com. That's MYTHOLOGIE candles.com.
And be sure to use the code Prancing Pony when you check out. That way you'll get a free 2-ounce candle with any purchase. Now that's mythologycandles.com. Mythology is spelled with an I and an E at the end instead of the Y. And use the promo code Prancing Pony for a free candle.
That's right. So now let's get back to Frodo and Sam as they get a moment to themselves to talk about elves. Alan?
All right. I'm going to go ahead and pick up exactly where you left off. One evening, Frodo and Sam were walking together in the cool twilight. Both of them felt restless again. On Frodo, suddenly the shadow of parting had fallen. He knew somehow that the time was very near when he must leave Lothlorien. "What do you think of elves now, Sam?" he said. "I asked you the same question once before. It seems a very long while ago, but you have seen more of them since then." "I have indeed," said Sam. "And I reckon there's elves and elves. They're all elvish enough, but they're not all the same. Now, these folk aren't wanderers or homeless, and seem a bit nearer to the likes of us. They seem to belong here, more even than hobbits do in the Shire. Whether they've made the land or the land's made them, it's hard to say if you take my meaning. It's wonderfully quiet here. Nothing seems to be going on, and nobody seems to want it to. If there's any magic about it, it's right down deep where I can't lay my hands on it in a manner of speaking." "You can see and feel it everywhere," said Frodo. "Well," said Sam, "you can't see nobody working it. No fireworks like poor old Gandalf used to show. I wonder we don't see nothing of the Lord and Lady in all these days. I fancy now that she could do some wonderful things if she had a mind. I'd dearly love to see some elf magic, Mr. Frodo." "I wouldn't," said Frodo. "I am content, and I don't miss Gandalf's fireworks, but his bushy eyebrows, and his quick temper, and his voice. Especially because his quick temper was always directed to Pippin and not me."
And that always made me laugh.
I know. It was very
I remember
funny
when he
making
used
fun
to
of
call
Pippin.
Pippin fool of a took, and
Fool
I
of a
would
took.
laugh.
I would laugh at Pippin.
And then
with
later on,
Gandalf. It was always
Later on in the same dinner, he would say it again. Fool of a
and I would
took,
laugh
he
again.
say.
All right.
Oh, man. All right. Well, so Frodo and Sam are walking, feeling a little restless. This is going to be a really key discussion point. We'll get to it as we go through this conversation between them. But Frodo knows that the time to leave is coming. And he asks Sam, "What do you think of elves now?" This reminds me of something we discussed way back. I mean, much farther back than I really thought it would have been. It's episode 107, which is the first part of A Shortcut to Mushrooms.
My goodness, it's that
season
far
3.
ago. My goodness. Yeah, that is a long time
61
ago.
episodes ago was the beginning of Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I know. It's shocking. But back at the beginning of season 3, after having a conversation with the elves that Sam tells Frodo about, and declaring them to be wonderful folks, elves, sir, well, we get this passage. "They are," said Frodo. "Do you like them still, now you have had a closer view?" "They seem a bit above my likes and dislikes, so to speak," answered Sam slowly. "It don't seem to matter what I think about them. They are quite different from what I expected. So old and young, and so gay and sad, as it were." Frodo looked at Sam rather startled, half expecting to see some outward sign of the odd change that seemed to have come over him. It did not sound like the voice of the old Sam Gamgee that he thought he knew, but it looked like the old Sam Gamgee sitting there, except that his face was unusually thoughtful. So
I love
again,
that,
we
that
get
passage.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great passage, and we see that. I think we discussed back then that's sort of the first. It's Sam's first time to really mature in this story.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of his first step forward, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's his first step forward into a larger world, as Obi-Wan might say. And he's just for the first time kind of like, he's getting out of his little bubble of the Shire, and he's just experiencing the world. He's experiencing elves for the first time, and it is a very foundational experience for him. Here, Frodo is kind of hearkening back to that and giving him another chance. Like, okay, you've come this far. What do you think of him now?
Yeah. A lot of time has passed since that question was first asked. And so it makes sense now that he has more data to ask that question again. And Sam's observation is interesting. He now observes there's a distinction between the different types of elves. We talked once.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Was it Pippin or Merry that we thought somebody asked, were they trying to get a jab in?
we thought maybe Pippin doesn't totally know the difference between Rivendell elves and Mirkwood elves. Yeah.
Right.
He wouldn't not that he didn't know the difference, but he wouldn't distingush. Yeah.
Right. He wasn't drawing a distinction between them. It's not as though he's so geographically challenged that he confuses Rivendell with Mirkwood, though we know he doesn't study the maps.
That is true. He does not.
But Sam here really does show a development, a growth and understanding that there are differences among the elves. These are not wandering elves,
Mm-hmm.
and that they belong here. They and the land are inseparable. I love that line about whether
Yeah.
they made the land or the land made them.
That's so great.
Wow.
I know.
They
Yeah.
belong here. And for somebody who, a hobbit totally belongs in the Shire, he sees the Shire as being who the hobbits are.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to say they belong here even more than we do in the Shire, that's strong.
I wonder if it's because hobbits connect to the Shire because of the community and because of the people around them and because of what they've made it.
That's true.
And elves connect with the forest, especially this forest, in relation to the forest itself. They connect with the trees themselves. And so maybe that's why he feels there's a deeper connection, because elves actually connect with the land itself, with Arda, whereas hobbits, what they're really feeling is a sense of home and the community of other hobbits. But I don't know, maybe I'm oversimplifying, because we do know that hobbits have a connection to the earth too. So
true. But
maybe,
I think
maybe
they
I'm
have
wrong
a
about
historical recollection. They remember, I mean, not first generation, they don't remember directly, but they have a historical recollection of when they came and founded the Shire.
Yeah.
So even though they feel like they belong there, they know full well they came from somewhere else.
Yeah, only 1,400 years ago they were somewhere else.
Right, which, yeah, that's a long time, but it's not a long time in comparison to Galadriel and Lothlorien.
Right.
So, maybe there is that recognition here that they belong here even more than we belong where we are.
Right.
And then there's this bit about the magic. Deep and subtle, you can't even recognize it. It's really interesting to see how the two of them view this differently, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because they do have very different views, because Frodo counters politely, but he's kind of basically saying, like, what are you talking about? Like, the magic is everywhere here.
Mm-hmm. It pervades everything, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a part of everything around us. So
Right.
so how would you, why would you say that it's not recognizable?
Well, and it's because Sam doesn't see magic unless it's somebody working magic, right? That's his response. It's like, well, I don't see anybody doing any magic. I don't see anybody doing
Right.
things like Gandalf did fireworks. He's just recalling the simple magia of Gandalf.
Right. And then he speculates that, man, Galadriel could probably do some amazing things if, she would just finally do some magic around here. Again, little knowing that
Somebody
this
would-
entire
right.
place is magic because of her.
Entertain me. I demand to be entertained.
Pull a rabbit out of a hat, Galadriel. Come on. Come on. Pull
where's
some
the magic
handkerchiefs out of your
show?
mouth.
I'm not here for Penn and Teller. I'm here for Galadriel. Come on now.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, he does express the desire to see that sort of visible magia, kind of like,
yeah.
see some like parlor tricks, like fireworks.
Right, exactly. I want to see something that is magic the way I understand magic to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Whereas Frodo, his whole point is, look, there's magic everywhere. Every bit of this forest is filled with magic.
Mm-hmm.
You can't breathe without magic entering you. And he's content with what he has. He doesn't need the magia. And when it comes to missing Gandalf, I love this line. He doesn't miss what Gandalf could do. He misses who Gandalf was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really, really deep, really wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
And it takes me back to this idea of remembering the man versus remembering the myth. Frodo did have a few verses in his poem about the amazing things he could do and this, this mythical figure that he was. But when you get right down to it, who he remembers is Gandalf the man.
Yeah.
Just this guy.
As we should. He's
Yeah.
Gandalf's just this guy.
Gandalf is just this guy, And then I guess that was the end of the part that you read, but this next paragraph, where Sam starts to talk about, he says something that's really profound here, and I think is a very mature thing for Sam to say.
Mm-hmm.
He says that this is like being at home and on a holiday at the same time. So, okay, yeah. So it's a place let's parse that. It's a place that's incredibly comfortable.
Right.
You feel like you know where everything is. You feel completely at peace and at home in this place. And yet at the same time, it's an escape.
Yes.
So
it's giving you restoration that you need.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that makes perfect sense. But then here's the thing that I really like. He says that we should go soon if we have to go. They can't do anything more to help us. And I think of two things with that. The first thing I think of is recovery and escape and consolation. And Sam is recognizing, look, we've recovered, we've escaped, we've been consoled. Let's go already.
Let's move on. Right.
Yeah.
I think because the longer they stay, the harder it's going to be to leave. he recognizes that this has got a hold on them. Yeah.
That is true. I also think we saw this a couple of pages ago, and I said, let's think about this later. The idea that the grief is growing more keen the longer they stay there.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think Sam recognizes very maturely, very wisely, that if they stay too long,
that's what they'll dwell
their
on.
grief, they're just going to dwell on Gandalf's death, and maybe that timelessness is going to make it impossible for them to move on. And I think add to that what you just said is that the place itself is going to have a hold on them. Yeah. I think Sam is very wise to point out that, look, it's been fun, but now it's time to go. We got to move on. Time to ramble on, as Led Zeppelin might say.
Time to ramble on. And he's got some of the gaffer's old wisdom, every once in a while he throws out one of these old proverbs. It's the job that's never started, it takes longest to finish. Hey, he's right.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
What a great line.
I love it.
Everything that he pulls from the old gaffer's hat is usually spot on.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
But Frodo's not ready to leave yet.
No, not quite yet. He definitely wants to see Galadriel one more time. And wow, speak her name and she appears, right?
That's pretty cool. Before I read my passage, I just can't help but think about, Frodo saying, like, I sure want to see the Lady of the Elves again. She's purty. I just want to see her again. I don't know. There's probably more to it than that, but
Probably.
It's a cute thing for Frodo to say.
All right. So go ahead and pick up after that where the Lady Galadriel shows up, all right?
Okay.
All right.
Even as he spoke, they saw, as if she came in answer to their words, the Lady Galadriel approaching. Tall and white and fair she walked beneath the trees. She spoke no word, but beckoned to them. Turning aside, she led them towards the southern slopes of the hill of Carasgaladon, and passing through a high green hedge they came into an enclosed garden. No trees grew there, and it lay open to the sky. The evening star had risen and was shining with white fire above the western woods. Down a long flight of steps the lady went into the deep green hollow, through which ran murmuring the silver stream that issued from the fountain on the hill. At the bottom, upon a low pedestal carved like a branching tree, stood a basin of silver, wide and shallow, and beside it stood a silver ewer. With water from the stream, Galadriel filled the basin to the brim and breathed on it, and when the water was still again, she spoke. Here is the mirror of Galadriel, she said. I have brought you here so that you may look in it, if you will.
Well, if you will. And of course, they will. We'll get to that in a minute, but
they will.
So she arrives and she silently calls to them. It's another maybe link to that mental interrogation. She does have the ability to sort of reach into their minds and say something, that's for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she leads them to the southern slopes of the hill. And I love this description of the hedge. This high hedge, this enclosed garden, no trees, it's open to the sky. This is a lovely place. In a place filled with trees, this place is open to the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I love that. And because it's open to the sky, you can see that the evening star is shining above the woods to the west.
Right.
And we're told by the text that the evening star had risen. And I want to spend a little bit of time on that because there is something on this in Hammond and Skull's Lord of the Rings Companion. Mm-hmm. Because if you're thinking, wait, it's in the west, doesn't everything set in the west, not rise in the west?
Right.
Yes, that's true. Everything in the sky sets in the west.
Physics has not changed. That's correct.
Right.
The Earth still spins in the direction it spins.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So here's what Hammond and Skull have to say about this to explain it. They say, if by evening star Tolkien meant Venus, it would not visibly rise, but become visible as the sun sank in the west and would set while the night was young. Anybody who's ever stargazed enough will know that, the sun will set and then you'll see Venus setting right behind it. As the sun sets, you'll start to see Venus appear, but you're not going to see it rise.
Well, no.
Going back to Hammond and Skull, Venus can visibly rise only when it is the morning star. That is when it's in the east. Nonetheless, this is what Tolkien wrote, and is probably significant since the light of Eärendil has a particular importance at this point in the chapter.
Yes, it does. And now, folks, you know exactly why I let Sean take that little bit.
Yes,
he mentioned the
Eärendil
name.
Sense was tingling.
Yes.
And I
said
think
the word. You said the word. Oh, no,
you
he
said
said
the
word.
But I think it's worth pointing out, Tolkien just says that the evening star had risen. I think this could be sort of a poetic construction.
It had become visible.
Yeah.
He
didn't say the evening star was rising in the west because that would just be astronomically inaccurate.
Right.
it's up. You can see it. It has risen. I think that's
Right.
kind of what he's getting to.
It has appeared. It has
Yes.
appeared in the sky, and it has appeared because the sun has gone below the horizon, thus enabling you to actually see it with your naked eye because it's not
Right.
as bright, of course.
Exactly.
But it's very, very bright, as we'll see.
Yes. And we'll see just how significant it is pretty soon here.
Well, yeah, next chapter.
Yep.
I'm not sure where in the next chapter. Probably towards the end of that chapter,
I
actually.
think so. Yeah, the gifts.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we'll get another mention of Eärendil later in the chapter.
We will.
I've read
We
ahead.
will. As you should. Are you trying to tell me that you don't prepare for the show, Sean? Really? Am I the only one who does the work around here? No.
I will not answer that question.
Fifth Amendment, folks. All right. So they go down this flight of steps into the hollow, and in there is this silver stream, but its source is the same fountain that we saw earlier, the one that was on the wide lawn lit by the silver lamps. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I say a word about the fountain?
You may. Please. That's why you're here.
Am I allowed to speak about this book? I hope people are here to hear to listen to me speak.
Yes.
I'm
please do.
reminded of Tolkien's Lay of Outru and Etrun, which,
Oh, yeah.
you know, before a few years ago, I think most people had not read this work, and now it's,
No, I
it's
haven't.
recently been published in a
Right.
I certainly hadn't either, but it's just a few years ago was published in a new edition edited by Verlin Flieger, and when it came out, there was a lot of comparison made to the Corrigan in that poem, who's this
Right.
sort of fairy witch queen figure
Mhm.
who lives next to a fountain.
Yes.
And a lot was made of sort of the comparison between her and Galadriel. I think at times too much was made of the comparison.
Yeah, I think so.
But there are definitely some points of
commonality.
commonality. Thank you very much. Idiom, sir. There are some points
In your own
of-
unique idiom, sir? Idiom.
That's the one.
Idiom.
Yep.
All right.
There are definitely some points of commonality. There's the
Yes.
the figure herself, although the Corrigan is very much a villain. But
right.
but there's the fountain, there's a file, and there's
Uh-huh.
The enchanted forest and stuff. So there are some parallels, and so I
Sure,
do think
sure.
of that when I read about this fountain now, and I would strongly recommend everybody go and read that book. It's not
yeah,
too
it's
thick. It's a
No.
quick read. You can read it in an afternoon, and it's highly worth it. But the other thing
Definitely.
that I'm thinking about with the fountain is once again the Gardens of Lorien in Valinor, because it was
yes.
also known for its fountains. And I actually
Right.
have some of that text in front of me here. It said
All right, then.
those fountains were the ones from which all those who dwell in Valinor draw refreshment.
Okay.
So there is a possibility here that Tolkien is kind of drawing on his own mythology again, as he sometimes does.
Yes.
So
course.
I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, I'm glad you did. So not only does this stream come from that fountain is its source, this is also that area where the fountain is the area where the company's pavilion was made. So they've basically gone from where they've been staying near the fountain to where the fountain leads.
That's a good
So
point, yeah.
there's just this little connection here.
Mhm.
And so they end up at the bottom of the hollow, and there's a pedestal with a silver basin and a ewer. Now, let's just real quickly, not word nerdery, just definition. That just means a large jug.
Mhm.
That's it.
Right.
Real simple.
So Galadriel fills the basin with water from the stream. She breathes on it. And
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
the fact that the breath activates it. That tells us that
Yep.
the magic
This
is in
is
her.
magic.
It's not in the water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is correct. Yeah.
And then she finally speaks for the first time once the water
That's
is
right.
still.
She hasn't said a word yet. Yeah.
Correct. And she actually speaks aloud. She invites them to look into her mirror.
Now, you may remember that we mentioned John Ratliff last time and his research into Rider Haggard's She as possible inspiration for Galadriel. Now, in relation to this passage, he points out that in Haggard's work, we are told of a vessel like a font cut in carved stone full of pure water. Now, both Galadriel and Asha use this mirror to show the heroes visions of distant places and use it themselves to see what's happening in the outer world. So, a lot of similarities. Now, there are plenty of differences too, which is why
Of course.
Tolkien warns us about the bones in the soup after all. But I thought it'd be
Absolutely.
interesting to point those little similarities out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those.
Yeah.
And then we get a very tense description before
Oh, yes.
the passage you're going to read,
Mhm.
where Frodo asks these questions, what should I look for and what will we see?
Yeah. But boy, it is a tense moment, isn't it, though? The air was
is.
still, the dell is dark.
Yeah.
There's some tension here. Building.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everything sort of stops before
Yes, it
this
does.
moment. And
Yeah,
then,
as we often see at key moments like that in the story, where it seems like time freezes.
and Galadriel gives this answer, which you're about to read.
That's right. Many things I can command the mirror to reveal, she answered, and to some I can show what they desire to see. But the mirror will also show things unbidden, and those are often stranger and more profitable than things which we wish to behold. What you will see if you leave the mirror free to work, I cannot tell, for it shows things that were, and things that are, and things that yet may be. But which it is that he sees, even the wisest cannot always tell. Do you wish to look? Frodo did not answer. And you, she said, turning to Sam, for this is what your folk would call magic, I believe, though I do not understand clearly what they mean, and they seem to use the same word of the deceits of the enemy. But this, if you will, is the magic of Galadriel. Did you not say that you wished to see elf magic?
Can I change my answer?
I meant, do you have any fireworks, lady?
Yeah, right.
I like Piccolo Pete's and sparklers.
I just wanted some balloon animals.
Balloon animals, yes. Do you have a deck of cards? I can pull
right.
one. You can guess what I have, right?
Can you just do that one where you turn the dollar bill upside down?
Right, exactly.
But
I don't know about this crazy mirror thing.
yeah,
I don't know that I want to see
might
things.
be a little much.
This is like graduate level magic right here. I don't know that I want anything to do with this.
Yeah. But all right, let's see where this takes us.
Yeah.
So right at the beginning of your reading, Galadriel says, I can command it to show many things, but it has a mind of its own.
Right.
And those unbidden things that it chooses to show are stranger and more profitable.
So the stranger things are profitable, but only if you're Netflix.
Only to Netflix.
Boom.
Well done.
Had to. Yeah, but if you leave it free to work, that's interesting. I thought that passage really grabbed my attention because it suggests the viewer has some amount of control. Maybe not over what it will show, but whether it'll continue to show it.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that.
Like you don't have a channel guide, but you can push pause.
You have the ability to flip around the dial and see what you get. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like that she says that if you go in cold without any kind of attachment to a particular question, you get better results. Right. And I kind of think about the difference between like what you want to see versus what you need to see. You might go in with a particular question about what you want to know, but the mirror, if you don't go in with that question in mind, the mirror is going to show you what you need to know.
Yeah.
And it shows the past, the present, and the possible future.
Yeah, so, boy, that is trouble, isn't it?
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah.
Like everything else in this forest, it is a time machine.
Yeah.
It's not the crystal ball, it's the crystal bowl, but it's not even a crystal bowl. I know that. It's a metal bowl.
I know.
But still.
It's the Silver Bowl, presented by Galadriel, featuring the top teams from the ACC and the SEC in Bowl Week.
Yeah. We've had so many Styx references in the last couple of episodes. I was trying to get a crystal ball reference in there.
Oh, wow. That would have been a little bit more of a reach. Yeah. I didn't catch that right away.
Yeah.
Good call, though.
It doesn't quite work. But on that topic,
you're right. We had too much time on my hands.
Yeah. We had some Come Sail Away last time.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. Boy, this is kind of a Styx
with the title of the last episode. So, we've...
And who knows what this one's going to be yet. Did you know, folks, we don't always know those things until after we've recorded the title.
It's true. It's true. We
often get it directly from the silly things we say when we're talking.
We often do. And I think that'll be the case here.
Probably.
But on the topic of crystal balls, let's talk about the difference between what you see in the mirror versus what you see in the actual crystal balls of Middle-earth, the Palantiri.
Yes.
Because the mirror actually shows you things throughout time. It can show you the past and the present and the possible future.
Yeah.
The Palantiri don't do that. The Palantiri can help you see through space.
Right.
You can see across great distances.
But not time.
And you can communicate if the person you're communicating with can communicate with you. I guess either if you can read lips or if you can, if they can get inside your mind like somebody does. But
spoilers, yeah.
And I think that's a really key difference because, we do think of I sometimes think of the Palantiri as the crystal balls of Middle-earth, but they don't
Yeah.
really show the future.
They're like the closed-circuit cameras of Middle-earth, really, is all they are.
That's really what they are. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And yet some viewers of the Palantiri can make assumptions about the future based on present facts.
They almost always do. That's kind of the problem.
And they are frequently led astray by those assumptions. They are frequently deluded, especially if Sauron is on the other end.
That's exactly right. The thing is, the facts that they see may be accurate, but they're always without context.
Yes.
They're always they're not full. They're a limited selection of facts. And in the case of the one commanded by Sauron, they're the facts he wants somebody to see. So, of course, the conclusions that Denethor draws are going to be mistaken. Yeah.
Right. With that in mind, you can see the difference between what Denethor sees as the future destruction of Gondor, which is really just Sauron showing him things that are out there and sort of twisting his perception of them, versus Galadriel seeing actual possible futures in the mirror, or Sam and Frodo seeing actual possible futures in the mirror. So there is a strong distinction there, an important distinction.
Yes, there is. Now, one last thing on this. We're going to go back to a source that we haven't visited for a while, Paul Coker's Master of Middle-earth. He says something really good about the mirror that I wanted to bring in. It mixes up past, present, and future so indistinguishably that the gazer cannot be sure which is which. And in striving to avert a danger he thinks he sees lying ahead, he may take the very measures which are necessary to bring it about. All finite knowledge about the future is cursed by this Oedipian paradox. Necessarily so, because it is incomplete and therefore blind in its information about the means which must precede any given consequence.
That's like the classic danger of foreknowledge, isn't it? You
it is.
Don't really know how to respond to that, what to do with that information, because you could end up just making the prophecy inevitable.
Yeah,
which is
by
exactly
your very
what
actions.
I think Coker means with the Oedipian paradox. Yeah.
Yeah, he absolutely does. Yeah, the whole idea of your actions now make the thing you foresaw possible,
the
whereas
thing
if
you
you'd
were
just
trying
done
to
nothing,
avoid.
it couldn't have happened.
Right.
Yeah.
And he also points out the fact that it mixes up the past, present, and future, which is exactly what Galadriel means when she says even the wise can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
You're going to see
Which
this
is pretty
stuff,
amazing.
But
yeah. You're going to see some
Yeah.
things, man. You're going to see some things. But yeah.
Makes it sound like it's some sort of illicit substance. Like, man, come on, just try one of these, man. You're going to see some things. You're going to see past, present, and future, man.
Whoa.
But
not
yeah,
quite.
It's true. It's one of those things like you can see and you can know, but it's like, what do you do with that information?
Right.
It's dangerous.
It is dangerous.
A little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Yes, it is.
And so she asks them again,
Right.
do you want to look? And Frodo doesn't answer.
No, he doesn't say a word, so she just moves on. Okay, fine. I'll talk to you next. Sam, what about you? And I like that. She asks him very directly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And she really kind of spins it in a way that I bet he's probably feeling a little guilty about right now.
Oh, I'm sure he is. Yeah.
Because she gives him this really potent reminder about the tendency to categorize as magic, both this kind of magic, this sort of, it's honest, but it's confusing.
Well, yeah.
That kind of magic with the deceits of the enemy, the deceitful work of Sauron. Yeah.
Yeah. But she does it in such a way like, I don't understand. Like she's pretending to be naive, I think.
Yeah, she is.
They use the same word. I don't get it. I think she gets it full well.
I don't think that means what you think it means.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's time for us to quote our favorite letter, which of course would be number 131.
Of course.
In it, Tolkien says to Milton Waldman, I have not used magic consistently. And indeed, the elven queen Galadriel is obliged to remonstrate with the hobbits on their confused use of the word, both for the devices and operations of the enemy and for those of the elves. I have not because there is not a word for the latter, since all human stories have suffered the same confusion. But the elves are there in my tales to demonstrate the difference. Their magic is art, delivered from many of its human limitations, more effortless, more quick, more complete. Product and vision in unflawed correspondence.
That's right. He goes on, and its object is art, not power. Subcreation, not domination, and tyrannous reforming of creation.
Right.
The elves are immortal, at least as far as this world goes, and hence are concerned rather with the griefs and burdens of deathlessness in time and change than with death.
Mm.
The enemy in successive forms is always naturally concerned with sheer domination, and so the Lord of Magic and Machines.
Indeed. And it's also a good time to visit another letter. We're going to go take a look at number 155 to Naomi Mitchison.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've brought this one up before because it's where he really talks about Magia and Goetia.
Mm-hmm.
He starts by admitting, I'm afraid I have been far too casual about magic, and especially the use of the word, though Galadriel and others show by the criticism of the mortal use of the word that the thought about it is not altogether casual. But it is a very large question and difficult.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
and he goes
that's
on
an
to
understatement. Thank you, Professor.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes on to say, for the purposes of the tale, some would say that there is a latent distinction, such as once was called the distinction between Magia and Goetia. Galadriel speaks of the deceits of the enemy. Well enough, but Magia could be, was, held good per se, and Goetia bad. Neither is in this tale good or bad per se, but only by motive or purpose or use. Both sides use both, but with different motives. The supremely bad motive is, for this tale, since it is specially about it, domination of other free wills. The enemy's operations are by no means all goetic deceits, but magic that produces real effects in the physical world. And if folks are having trouble seeing the distinction here, I think what he's getting at is that goetia is illusion, deceit. It's showing something that's not really there.
The best example of that would be something we just talked about not all that long ago, and that was the phantasm that Gorlam saw that image of his wife, and it was an illusion. The text even tells us that it was this phantasm devised by Sauron. That is Goetia. So it's a non-real thing.
That's right. But yeah, it's very much illusion, and it's not necessarily bad, because Tolkien does say that both sides use both. So both sides use illusion. But Magia, on the other hand, is actually producing real effects.
Right.
It's actually doing
like the pine
something.
cones on fire.
Yes.
Like the light from the staff of Gandalf, that kind of thing.
Right. So anyway, back to Tolkien. But his Magia, speaking of Sauron, he uses to bulldoze both people and things, and his Goetia to terrify and subjugate. Their Magia, the elves and Gandalf, use sparingly. A Magia producing real results, like fire in a wet faggot, for specific beneficent purposes. Their Goetic effects are entirely artistic and not intended to deceive.
Right. And that's something that we're going to see here. This is both. I mean, there's physical magic with the actual mirror, but the illusion that it shows, the vision that it shows, would be Goetia. It's not real, right?
Probably. I don't know. I don't know if it's... I mean, I see what you're saying, because it's reproducing an image of something that has happened or is going to happen. So is that Goetia or is it more Magia? I don't know.
That may be one where it's kind of a little bit of both. And
it could be. I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not. I do not have an answer for it at all.
No, I don't either. Anybody have any thoughts? Feel free to let us know.
But I think that since it's something that's real, that has been real, or that could be real in the future, it's not something that's false. I tend to lean towards more Magia.
Yeah, it's almost like it's the Magia of a screen, of a remote television screen.
Mm-hmm.
It's not creating an illusion. It's not creating a hologram in front of the viewer.
It's not creating something that's not real. It's just giving you I don't know.
Well, except that the future it's giving you may not be real.
That's true, but it could be real. It's not false.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. You're right. It's a potential reality.
Yeah.
It's not going to show you fake things about the past or present. It's going to show you possibly fake things about the future, but only if that's the future that doesn't come about. Yeah, okay.
Right.
I buy that.
I don't know. We're splitting hairs.
And speaking of buying that, Sam says he will. He will buy that. He'll have a peep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'll have a peep. I like those little marshmallow bunnies with the yellow sugar on them. I'll have a peep too.
Do you like those things?
No, I actually hate them.
I was going to say, who likes those things? Because I don't.
No,
I mean, there's not many candies in the world that I don't like.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
that
sure
and
we will.
what's the other one that people don't like? I'm actually okay with candy corn, but I know a bunch of people think candy corn is like the most nasty candy in the world.
I'm fine with candy corn. I'm actually even fine with black licorice in small doses.
No. I know there are plenty of people who will tell me what a terrible human being I am because I don't like black licorice, but that isn't candy any more than broccoli is candy. So I mean, really.
Very small doses. I like Good and Plenty's.
Fine.
And,
Just don't ever put it in my bag at Halloween because that is not nice. I would rather have Mounds and Almond Joy than black licorice. And that's saying something because coconut's not candy either.
No, that's true. It's not. It's fruit. Sure.
Exactly. You're going to put an apple in my bag at Halloween? Fine.
Sure. Yeah, coconut's as healthy as an apple. Let's go ahead and keep telling ourselves that.
Fair enough. All right. Well, and then Frodo relents as well. I mean, we're not reading this passage. It's the end of the section that we're reading tonight. But, Sam says, I'll look. Frodo relents as well and says, I'd like to see what's happening at home. But I love this. Like it as not, I'll only see the stars. I'm already a cynic. I'm going into this skeptical. I'm going into this not believing that this is going to show me anything helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Galadriel says, okay, sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
but, you'll see what you're going to see. And, hey, don't touch the water. All right?
Hey,
look, but don't touch.
Right. Hands to yourself, hobbits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, folks, the mirror isn't done yet, and neither are we. After all, we have Bartleman's bag coming your way in just a minute. And when that's done, well, the talk continues all night long at the Prancing Pony.
That's right. We've always got lots of discussion happening in our social media spaces. At our common room on Facebook, you'll find comments, questions, corrections, and more on every episode, as well as updates from us throughout the week. Just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook and click the like and follow buttons.
And now we have another common room, this time over on Reddit. You can find great discussions over there at r/PrancingPonyPod. And as always, you can find us on Twitter and on Instagram with the handle @PrancingPonyPod. So follow us wherever you happen to be. And please, if you like us, share us. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, anywhere you happen to find Tolkien fans, let them know.
And if you really want to let the world know your feelings about us, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. The more reviews we have, the more visible our podcast is, which helps others find us and this great community of Tolkien fans that we've all built together.
That's right. And of course, if you'd like access to exclusive content like our postscripts to every episode, our quarterly specials on individual topics, some PPP swag, and more like Discord hangouts and Discord live episodes, check out patreon.com/prancingponypod to find out how you can join the fellowship of the podcast. Now, I think it's time to see what old Bartleman has in the mailbag for us. Sean?
All right. Well, we had a handful of listeners write into us to correct a little assumption we made in episode 162.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah. This was in regards to Aragorn's comment about the fellowship being little more than 5 leagues from the gates. Now, from our conversation, it was very obvious, I think, to everybody that we assumed that he meant we're a little more than 5 leagues from the gates of Lothlorien or the gates of Caras Galadhon. We're a little more than 5 leagues from our destination, but that we can't make it there tonight, so let's stop here. Right. Well, fortunately, a few listeners set us straight because we were very, very wrong about that.
Yes, we were. And in fact, we want to give hat tips to Baragon, to Tanya P., and to Chris B., who all pointed out, kindly and respectfully, that no, they mean they are not much more than 5 leagues from the gates of Moria. And even though they'd like to put more distance between themselves and the orcs who will undoubtedly be chasing them, they can't go any further. As Chris pointed out in his email to us, it's still a couple of days before they get to Caras Galadhon with Haldir, so there's no way they were that close.
Absolutely right. I can't remember which one of us made the mistake first, but we were both right there with it. So was it? Okay. Well, thank you.
I think so.
But I was right there with it. I don't, whatever.
It's what happens. Yep.
But promise you folks, we will both spend some time doing penance in the Samwise Gamgee Memorial Chamber of Foolishly Misconstrued Distances.
I like that. As long as we can stay 6 feet apart from one another, or maybe go in at different times.
I think we have to go in at different times because the problem with that chamber is that you misconstrue the distances. So we're going to think we're 6 feet apart,
but it's really,
like 3. So different times. Okay. You can go in first. Just don't eat all the bacon. All right. Save some for me.
Oh, don't make me promise something I can't live up to. I mean, come on. That's a high bar, man.
It's a lot to ask. I know.
I won't eat the uncooked bacon. How's that? I mean, they've got the buffet tray with all of the bacon, but they're still cooking some in the back. I won't eat the stuff they're still cooking, but I'll eat all the rest of it.
Thank you. All right. But you might wait until they cook it and you'll eat it once it's cooked.
Yeah, of course. I'll stick around. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll eat it all.
Yeah, I know you will. That's why I said it.
Of course I will.
All right. Well, next up.
Now I
few
want
listeners-
bacon, man. It's like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm going to leave this booth when we're done recording and go make some bacon because of you. Thanks a lot, Sean.
You're
I'm
very
going to have to
welcome.
run an extra couple kilometers tomorrow when I get on the
You
road.
are very welcome. I'm happy to help. I'm here for you.
All right.
All right. Well, also on that episode, number
Better than
162.
Bovril.
Probably is. I'm not
yeah.
going to fight that one. Yeah.
No.
So also in reference to that same episode, a few listeners who know more about ring mail than we do,
Again,
which is
low
admittedly
bar.
a pretty low bar,
Yeah.
wrote
yeah.
in to clear up some other questions we had about how Frodo managed to escape with nothing more than a bruise. You know, I mean, yeah, I know we had the mithril shirt, but he's still like a bruise still seemed like a very slight wound for him. Now, I wondered in that episode whether rings driven into the flesh meant that the rings were split and had bent from the force of the blow, and that maybe a sharp, pointy ring end had actually pierced Frodo's skin. Well, several listeners told me that's almost definitely not the case. I'm going to give a hat tip to listeners Jeff P., Chris B., Kevin D., Ian T., and Paul B., because my goodness, there are a lot of people out there who know more about ring mail than we do.
Well, like you said, low bar.
Low bar. They all explained to us that the rings in ring mail, particularly high-quality ring mail, were usually riveted to keep them closed. So they're riveted precisely to prevent what I was worried about.
Right.
You know,
Right.
the ring splitting and piercing somebody. Granted, not all ring mail was riveted. The cheap stuff, I'm told, was budded instead of riveted, which means that the rings were just kind of like pushed together to mostly close them, but with enough force
They're
they
only
actually
mostly
could
closed.
Well done. Well done. It's been a long
yeah.
time since we had a Princess Bride reference.
I know. He
But-
clearly said to butt, and to butt is to not rivet. It's the...
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, sorry.
So, but yes, they could open under force if it was the cheap stuff.
Yeah. But this is mithril. This is not the cheap stuff.
Right, yeah. So yes, let's acknowledge that, yes, if Frodo's mail had been budded, sure, it is possible that a ring could have opened and pierced his flesh like I was worried about. But
Right.
knowing the value of that mithril shirt, it ain't the cheap stuff.
No.
And so it's virtually impossible that it was budded. It was
yeah,
most likely riveted, I'm told by all
Certainly.
of the folks who wrote to us about this. Paul B., who was actually a mail artisan himself, suggested that a large part of the value of mithril would be that each one of the tiny rings were meticulously riveted together.
Huh.
Such a task would take years to complete, even by a master.
His was the email that said, like, even thinking of that terrifies me, right? Or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because
I
it was
remember
like
that.
it would be so much work to put
so
into
much
that. Yeah.
work. Yeah.
And meanwhile, Jeff P. suggested that, you know, maybe the artisans would have even had the skill to fuse the rings together into a solid piece, given that they're
Oh.
dwarves and are working with a magical metal. Now, of course, that's
Well, yeah.
speculation, but,
True.
you know, we are certainly in magical smith, magical metal situations, so it's a
No doubt
possibility.
about that. Yeah, I suppose so. I wondered why a spear that would have skewered a wild boar, but didn't manage to penetrate the mail, wouldn't have at least left Frodo with some broken ribs. Now,
Mhm.
Baragon pointed out that we might want to ask the question a little differently. He says we should ask this question. Can a force insufficient to break a hobbit's ribs if applied in a blunt blow still be sufficient to make a sharp spear go through a wild boar? He then says the answer is not obvious, and I think it may well be yes. He then pointed us to some incredible research that's been done on the physics of Bard's slaying of Smaug with an arrow in a book called How to Kill a Dragon with a Bow and Arrow by Andrew White. Idiot's Guide to Killing a Dragon with a Bow and Arrow.
Right,
I'd love that,
right.
the yellow cover.
Yeah, yeah.
Crispy added a little context to this in a separate email, giving us a little of the physics of the pressure of a spear point versus a blunt force trauma, which I will not utter here. Because,
you
of
for
course, that would be, well, not only gory, but it would probably take us a little too far afield.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Chris says he thinks it's possible that Frodo at least has cracked ribs, since we were told he is in a lot of pain and it hurts to breathe. Chad B., that would be Chad in Texas, compared mithril to Kevlar, which is known for dissipating force incredibly efficiently. And then finally, Paul B. suggested that the key to whether or not Frodo would be hurt might just be the thickness and hardness of the leather beneath the mithril mail. Now, a thin jerkin wouldn't require a lot of force to pierce, and that if the captain had struck Frodo with all his might, then we should expect to see some broken bones and internal damage. Given that Tolkien describes the leather as soft, Paul believes, and I agree with him, that Frodo got off very lucky for the hit he took.
Yeah, I agree with him as well. And there's also one detail that I found really interesting. both Paul and also our good friend Luke Shelton at the Tolkien Experience podcast, both of them pointed out that mail was historically a better defense against slashing and cutting blows than it was against piercing weapons like spears. On Twitter, Luke shared some really cool videos showing spears going through mail into like ballistics gel or something. This was not, this wasn't like actual. It's not actual violence. No, it's experiments, not violence.
No, of course not.
So really cool videos showing like, guys throwing spears through mail. And it's really astonishing how far a spear could penetrate mail in the real world, like a few inches into the flesh for ordinary earthly mail.
Yeah.
Paul B. said that spears were the bane of mail in the past. And the fact that it was able to stop a strike from a powerful blow is a testament to the legendary properties of mithril. So really awesome insights from a lot of our listeners. And I can tell you, man, if I ever have to face off against Sauron, I want these guys to make my armor. So
definitely.
Consider yourselves on my short list, guys.
Please do.
And thank you all for responding.
Definitely. We really appreciate your input. This is the kind of thing where we're super grateful for the Tolkien community because, we have a little bit of knowledge about a lot of things and we can do a little bit of research, but, we can't spend hours and hours and hours and hours researching one single topic, in preparation for an episode because we've got a whole chapter to outline and research.
Right.
So we end up relying on you guys because there's always going to be somebody in our audience of, 8 to 10,000 people now who's going to know a lot about one subject. They're true experts in that field. And how many times have we had gently explained to us the error of our ways by true experts, by people who know what they're talking about. It's great.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely. And I think that's a wonderful segue into the next question. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of experts, next up, Jesse H., a professor of social science and international studies, wrote to us with this amendment. He says, an issue came up in the podcast, I'm much closer to catching up now, which falls within my particular bailiwick, and I thought a response was warranted. Jesse is an anthropological linguist. Wow.
I know, right?
I just look at
super cool,
say,
Jesse.
Wow. Yeah. And his area of study is the Cornish language Caernarvon. He had some feedback on episode 124, in which we delved into some very old and, it turns out, very outdated study on the Cornish language. He says, you mentioned John Bannister's 1871 The Glossary of Cornish Names and the inclusion of Goldberry in this list. As you mentioned, he argues for a Celtic Caernarvon root, meaning rich field. You also rightly note that Bannister's work has been questioned later, and this is certainly one of those cases. Jesse gave us a full analysis of Bannister's mistranslations and more accurate translations from Robert Morton Nance's A New Cornish Dictionary. Barrack, which Bannister argues is rich, is actually something more like grossness or fatness. And gold, which Bannister says is from gwell, or field, according to Jesse is also iffy. Jesse says gwell is not the most common term for a field, which is park. It can mean field, but also field of battle. Jesse wraps this all up by saying, and I'm quoting him now, Nance's dictionary came out in 1938 and quickly became the go-to academic standard for Cornish studies. And while it has been criticized since, it was the only academic dictionary for the language during the writing of The Lord of the Rings. While it is possible that Tolkien may have seen the 1871 glossary and the name within, I doubt that he would have taken a name from Caernarvon without examining its meaning using the latest sources available to him. It seems unlikely to me that he would have chosen a name that could easily have been translated gross field of battle.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think you got a point there, Jesse.
Yeah, I concede. He certainly does.
Yeah.
And finally, he adds, my guess would be that Tolkien had not encountered the name Goldberry, buried deep in a relatively obscure name glossary, because if he had, then he would have traced its actual roots and immediately abandoned it.
Convincing argument. Absolutely. Yep. A wonderful, well-presented, and very clear response from an actual expert in the field. So thank you, Jesse. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do recall saying back when we had that conversation about Goldberry's name, I think I said, look, I'm way deep in speculation.
I remember that. Here. I think I commented about you being like, get your, hip waders
Get my waders on.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, we had a question from a listener. And the truth is, we hadn't gone into any word nerdery on Goldberry's name because I didn't think there was anything to say. I just thought, well, Goldberry, that's what it is.
Right.
But, somebody asked me a question, and so I did what I do. I went and looked under every rock, and I presented what I found. admittedly knowing that it was based on, well, not much.
Indeed.
Well, unfortunately, what happens sometimes when we turn over every rock looking for an answer, sometimes we end up finding something, but we end up with mud or something worse on our shoes. And I think that's what happened here. And I think, frankly, just one of the challenges of using the web for research when you're a generalist is that a lot of the information that's out there for free is, public domain. A lot of it is old information. And that's how I found this, 1871 glossary, which obviously is very outdated. Totally agree. Yeah. Gross Field of Battle does not sound like a name that anyone should be using to refer to Mrs. Bombadil. And I have a feeling Mr. Bombadil would have words with you if you did.
He would. Yes, he would.
And I trust
calling
that...
my wife a gross field of battle?
Yeah. Ring a dong dillo. Watch what you're saying there. Let's go take this outside.
You don't want me to go all Kool-Aid Man on you now, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
No, absolutely, totally agree that, Jesse's got to be right here. And I suspect that since Tolkien did have some knowledge of Celtic languages, because we know he did, I think that if he had come across that etymology, just like Jesse says, if he had come across that etymology, he would have checked more recent sources. He would have known that etymology was debunked by the time he was writing. He would have seen right through it. So,
agreed.
Again, thank you so much, Jesse, for the clarification on that. And folks, it seems like sometimes a gold berry is simply a gold berry.
Indeed. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Now, please be sure to join us again next week when Galadriel finally goes nuclear.
All shall love me and despair when they see my glow-in-the-dark dress.
Oh, if you have a glow-in-the-dark dress, Sean, I already despaired. That's for sure.
It looks nice on me. It's a special occasion thing.
You go right ahead. I never want to see any occasion that special.
And but the breastplate I had custom made, and so it goes with the dress. What are you going to do?
I'm just going to leave that there. Folks, as always, we want to thank each of you listening, but we also do want to give a very special thank you to our patrons at the Kierdance contribution tier. James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Bruce in California, Mario in Utah, Seth in Texas, Ella in California, Joseph in Texas, and Kathy in North Carolina. Thank you all so very much.
Also, make sure you don't miss a single episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, and most of all, your songs about Gandalf to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
Barliman's never, ever punctual with the mail, but we'll get back to you as soon as we can, as soon as he lets us. Yeah. And your question or comment may be featured on an upcoming show someday.
Someday. He doesn't even pretend to be punctual with the mail anymore.
No, he doesn't.
Not at all.
No, he's gotten really flippant about it, actually. Every once in a while, I'll reach out to him and say, hey, Barley, how's the mailbag doing? And he just, no.
Yeah, you'll get it when you get it. Shut up.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
He was really rude the other day.
He was.
Anyway. Well, we may have to resort to Bob and Knob here pretty soon, but for now, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.